Good morning or afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining our inaugural JDE Security Academy session, Introduction to JDE Security. We've still got a couple of minutes before our start time, and we still have some folks logging in, so we're going to go ahead and give them a few more minutes to get logged in before we get started. Once again, thank you for joining. Good morning, everyone. This is Brian Connor with Remote CNC Services. Once again, thank you for joining our inaugural JDE Security Academy session, Introduction to JDE Security. As I said, my name is Brian. I am known as the JDE Security Guy. I have been working with JD Edwards for just about 25 years now and focused exclusively on security within the JD Edwards product for the last 11 years. We're going to have a little intro on remote CNC services before we jump into the content. Remote CNC Services is a full range CNC administration services provider. We do obviously JD Edwards, we do cloud hosting, technical implementations and upgrades. We are a Tennessee-based company founded in 2006. We are an Oracle Gold partner. We are an all-out security gold partner, veteran owned, 20 plus years of JDE senior technical consulting experience. Customer service is one of our pillars. I know everybody likes to say that, but we focus very, very heavily on customer service, and we are very proud of the fact that we have not lost a single managed services customer to a competitor in the entire time we've been in business. So what do we do? Managed services. We have a very experienced CNC team. We have real-time monitoring. We do consulting. So installs, upgrades, tools releases, multi-foundation, 64-bit upgrades, anything of that nature. We do security, SOX compliance, security re-implementation, help you with reporting, anything of that nature. We also help with cloud hosting solutions. Security is a core tenet of what we do at Remote CNC. It's part of our DNA. We care about your security. When we connect to our clients, we don't have any workstation level VPN connections. We have limited site-to-site VPN by IP and port and multi-factor authentication. We have a hardened terminal server for all of our access. We're always encrypted for super fast response. We are Type 2 SOC 1, 2, and 3 certified, ISAE 3402, ITAR, and 27001 certified. So obviously security is something we take very, very seriously here. This is our obligatory safe harbor statement. Give you a minute to read over that. All right, so what is on the agenda for today? This is Introduction to JDE Security. So obviously we're going to talk about JDE Security. What is JDE Security? What are the JDE security types and what do you use them for? And then we're going to get into what are some of the security model options that you have when implementing JD Edwards Security. A little bit of housekeeping. Most of you have probably done GoToWebinars before, but just in case you haven't, if you click over here, the little arrow will minimize that and you can drag this off screen so that you have full view of the entire screen. We will have a couple of poll questions today. So when those pop up, they'll come here in the polls. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask throughout the session. I like to make these as interactive as is possible. So I like to answer questions when they come up rather than waiting until the very end to try to answer anything and circle back to the proper slide. So please feel free to jump in at any time. We do have Matt Lamb, our sales manager, who is going to be monitoring questions and running the poll questions for us today. So again, please jump in with any questions as they come up. So what is JD Edwards Security? It is pervasive. It is a layer that sits between your users and the business data. It's how you control access to all of the data in your system, as well as all of the applications in your system. And it is critical to financial integrity of all of your data. It's also critical that security be a part of the discussion for every implementation and upgrade from day one. You don't want to wait until 2 weeks before go live and say, hey, let's look at security now and see what we can do. At that point, it's too little too late to really get an effective security implementation done in that amount of time. So what does the JDE security look like? Again, as we said, it's a layer that sits in between your users and everything that they do within the system. It starts off when your users log in. Security is used to determine what you can see on your menus. So when you log into your web browser and you launch JD Edwards and you open up your navigator, the programs that are visible are controlled by your security. So if you don't have access to a program, it's not going to show up on your task view. Every time you do click on a program, JDE looks up your access to determine what your rights are. Every time you query in an application, JDE looks up your security to determine what data you have access to see. Every time you try to manipulate data, either through a program or a UBE, JDE looks up your security to validate you have the rights to make the requested updates. So you may be able to see company 5 in sales orders, but row security has been applied. That means you can only view it. So if you try to make an update to it, again, JDE is going out there looking at the security to determine, are you allowed to make changes to the data that you're able to see? So security, when it's done correctly, nobody even knows anything about the security team. Nobody notices. When it's done incorrectly, everyone notices. security should be frictionless. What that means is it needs to be easy for your users and your administrators. If it isn't, your users will find ways around it. It's important to note that security is a business issue rather than a technical or IT issue. The business is what needs to determine what access is granted, what the roles look like, who gets access to certain companies and who doesn't get access to those companies. IT is responsible for implementing, but the business needs to and must be involved in designing what that access should look like. So what is security in your JD Edwards environment? Security and roles are common data files. That means they are shared across all of your environments by default. So when you log in, whether it is DV, PD, a QA environment, you're using a single security table and a single role relationships table. The security table is the F00950, and the role tables are the 92, F0092, and the F00926. All of those tables live in the system data source along with the role relationships table, which is the table where you control what roles have been allocated to a user. It is possible to have multiple security tables in an environment. It is not officially supported by Oracle, but there are many clients that do it. If you have requirements to be able to run different security in production and non-production, this is a very relatively easy solution to implement, but you need to keep in mind that you're going to have to do dual maintenance unless you have some tools to help you out with that. So how do I apply security in JD Edwards? It can be applied in one of three ways. So it can be applied directly to your user profile. So for example, Brian gets access to sales order entry and has add, change, and delete authority. Security can be applied to a role. So I have a sales order entry role that contains the access to run the sales order program and full access in an action security mode for that program as well. The final way that you can apply it is at the star public layer. This is a quote unquote role within JD Edwards. It is a catch-all. It is a role that cannot be unassigned from anybody. This is the final resting place for everything for JD Edwards security. So if the security has not been applied anywhere else, your system is going to look at whatever you have at the star public layer. Again, there's the three ways that you can apply security. There is no other way to apply security in JD Edwards. Best practice is to apply security to purpose-built roles. This allows you much greater control and flexibility in allocating access to users, and it helps remove friction from the process. There is a limit to the number of roles that can be assigned to a user. The official limit from Oracle and JD Edwards is 30 roles. In practice, it can and usually is less than that. What it depends on is the length of the role names in your system. The limiting factor is the SQL statement when JD Edwards is looking up security, and we'll get to why that's an issue here in a little bit. But again, if you have all of your role names 10 characters long, with our SQL statement, your practical limit on the number of roles assigned to a user is going to be closer to about 25. You can assign more than 30 roles to a user, but the results are going to be unpredictable. It's going to work one day and may not work the next. So you're going to be chasing issues for your users if you have more than the supported number of roles that are assigned to them. Security in E1 follows a well-defined logic. As long as you understand the logic behind the security, you can understand why someone has the access that they do. When I train people on site, one of the things I always say is it's not rocket science. It really isn't that complicated as long as you understand the logic behind the security. It's important to understand what the security types are, how they've been applied, how they interact with the user, anything at the user level, as well as other roles, and how it interacts with star public. As we mentioned before, star public is the default role that affects every user in the system. It's your last line of defense for security in your system. This is why when you're going to a closed security model, the settings should be applied at star public and not individually at specific roles to lock down the system. As we said before, security in JD Edwards is pervasive. Every time you click a button in Enterprise One, security is checked to see what access you have. It's always going to look for security at the user level first. So every button click, every query, every find, every update, JDE security is being looked at. It looks at it in a specific order. It looks first at your user level. If there is no record at your user level, it looks at your active role assignments. It orders those active role assignments by the sequence number, which is stored in the F00926, to look at the highest sequence number role first. So role 100 is checked before role 90, before role 80, and so on. Finally, if there's nothing at the role level, it checks star public. One thing to keep in mind is when JDE is looking at the roles, it's looking at the sequence number. It doesn't matter what order you assign the roles to the user and the role relationships. It matters what the sequence number is that was defined at the time the role was created. The role sequence number does not change unless your administrator has gone in and resequenced the roles. I highly recommend that not happen, because while you may fix an issue for one user, you're more than likely going to be causing issues for at least a dozen more because you've changed how security interacts. So if you're having an issue with the sequencer, you need to get down to the root of the issue rather than just going for the easy solution of changing the priority of the role or putting the security at the user level. This is one of my favorite diagrams for JD Edwards security. This slide was created by our partner, All Out Security, so I want to make sure I give credit to them for this. I highly recommend that you print this slide out and keep it by your desk if you're responsible for troubleshooting or supporting security in your JD Edwards environment. This is how JD security hierarchy is checked in the system for every single operation. It looks at the user, the star group or role, and then star public. But within those, there's other items that it's looking at. So it's looking at the form version, the form, the program version, the program, and then star all. So that's that same order of security of 1 through 5 is carried out at the user, at your roles from high sequence number to low sequence number, and then at star public. That's a lot of security that it's scanning through and a lot of things that it's looking for. The first record that JD Edwards finds, it stops. It doesn't matter if the next record was a full access record and you want the user to have full access. If the first record that's found says no, then that's what the user gets, no. All right, it's quiz time. So how does JDE security hierarchy work? So let's say we have a user that clicks on sales order. At the user level, we don't have any record. The user has 3 roles assigned, sequence 30, 20, and 10. Role sequence 30 has sales order run yes and inquiry only for the action security. The next sequence number has run no and yes for the action code security. Role sequence 10 is full access, so they can run it and they have add, change, and delete. Star public is set to inquiry only and you can't run any programs. So the applied security in this case for the user is role sequence 30. So since there's nothing at the user, JDE is going to look at the roles high to low sequence. So it doesn't matter if this role you really want them to have full access, the highest sequence role is the one that wins. All right, our next example, again, clicking on the sales order, we have a user level record, P4210 run yes, and full action code security, so they can add, change, and delete. Role sequence is set with run and inquiry only action code security. Role sequence 20 is set with run yes and delete yes. And role sequence 10 is set with run yes and delete yes. And star public again is set with run no specifically at the object and delete yes. So what is the actual security that's applied to the user? Again, if we go back and look at the hierarchy, anything that's done at the user level is going to take precedence over anything else. So JDE isn't even aware of any of the security at any of the roles or star public for this particular operation. What's at the user level is what wins. Last one, user clicks on sales order. If we don't have any record at the user level, but at role sequence 30, we have an application record that says they can run P4210. We have star public of star all run no, add no, change no, delete no. So we're in an inquiry only mode for everything. This is a closed security model. We got this slightly out of order here. So we have application security here at role sequence 30, and we have action security at role sequence 20. So what JD Edwards does is it looks and says, I have an application record here that allows them to run. So I apply role sequence 30 application security for the user. I don't have any action code security, so I keep looking. The next role it gets to, it sees I have action code security that has all yeses. So I apply that security for the user. So they get a combination in this case of role sequence 30 and role sequence 20 for their access. All right, so we've talked a little bit about what security is. I want to make sure we touch on what isn't security. Security is not the task view, the task options, option codes, or the menu filtering that's been applied at the role level. Those are all things that are done to improve the user interface. It's the original UX1 for JD Edwards. What you can see is not security. Although you frequently have the same team or individual that's responsible for managing all of this, it's not part of the security infrastructure. Security does not control system functionality. So it doesn't tell you that your next order status for a sales order is going to go to 500. It may prevent you from being able to advance the order, but it doesn't tell you what that order is going to be. It doesn't control the transaction flows or posts in that manner. Now I put this in here, security is not infallible. It's only as good as the information provided by the business to IT to implement it and the users. We talked about at the beginning, security needs to be frictionless. If it's not, users are going to find a way around it. In an open model, There are a myriad of ways to do that. A simple way, and what I've seen in many places, unfortunately, is simply sharing a login. So somebody doesn't have access to something, their friend does, or coworker, they just share the access because the coworker is tired of always having to do that piece of work for them. So your users are going to find a way around it if you don't make it easy. Again, menu filtering or fine cut is not security. I've had many clients say that we don't need to lock things down. We're fine in an open security model because we have really strict menu filtering or fine cut in place. And that is absolutely not the case. There, as I said before, there are many, many different ways of being able to access programs through JDE. If you go out to Google and search, there's even tutorial videos on how to do it. There are sites that will give you all the information you need for all of the programs and everything you need to be able to bypass in an open model. Menu filtering, I'm a big fan of. It's a fantastic way to focus your users on what they need to do for their daily work. They don't have to try to hunt through their huge menus to find everything that they need to do. They don't have to add everything to favorites. It's a small, focused, and concise menu for the end users. As their job responsibilities change, the menu visibility for them can very easily change with it. When you do menu filtering with your security, it significantly streamlines your user access. Again, going back to frictionless, it makes it simple and easy both for you as the administrator and for the end user. All right, next up, we want to talk about the security types. So in JD Edwards, security is object-based. So that means security is applied to individual objects. So things like a program, a UBE, or a user-defined object. Although there are many security types, most of your security is going to come down to application and action code security. With those two security types, there's primarily two objects that you're going to have security applied to. Obviously, it's the interactive application. So, well, it's P4210 would be sales order entry, or something like a batch post report, R09801. All right, time for our first poll question to make sure folks are paying attention. So Matt, if you want to go ahead and launch that. The question is, how many security types are there in JD Edwards 9.2? And we're looking at security types just in the 950 table. All right, we've got about half of you have voted so far. Very interesting watching the trends for which numbers we're looking at here. All right, about 71% have voted. All right, let's give it about another 10 seconds, Matt, and then we can close it off. All right, thank you, Matt. So the poll voting is closed. All right, so the options we had here were 18, 13, 29, 26, or 20. Are overwhelming, well, maybe not quite overwhelming. Most people are thinking 18, with second place coming in at 29 records. The correct answer is 26 records in the 950 and 9.2. So you're probably wondering what those 26 security records are. So let's take a look at them. This is something that you can find in your system when you're going into your security table, looking at the security types. You can just simply pull this information up and it shows you all of the security types in your system. Different levels of JDE Edwards are going to have different security types in here. Older versions, security type H is actively used. 9.2 security type H is no longer used. That was the security for the E1 pages that used to be stored in the 950. That's now moved to the UDO security, which is in the F00950W table. All right, we're not going to go through all 26 types, but we are going to go through some of the more common ones that you would use in your system. So first up are action and application security. So these are type 1 and type 3 security. As we've said multiple times, these are the most common security types in use in your JDE Edwards environment. Application security controls whether you can run a program or UBE or not. Action security is only for programs, and it controls what you can do once you're in the program. So can you add, change, delete, copy, click OK, or scroll to end? Processing option security, or type 5, is the UBE equivalent of action security for programs. What it does is controls what you can do with the processing options and data selection for these UBEs. You have change, you have prompt for data selection and prompt for versions, prompt for processing options, and then you have a couple of different choices around your modify data selection. One thing to keep in mind is your type 5 security, processing option security, can be applied to programs as well as UBEs. Action security, as we said, is programs only, but processing option can be applied to both. Processing option security has been improved from the original JDE Edwards release, starting with tools release 898.4.2, which is many years old. They really expanded what you can do with your processing option security, and it gives you very good control over what your users can do with your UBEs. If you aren't using it, I would highly recommend that you take a look at what the capabilities are and how you can help facilitate business users and protect your reports and how data processes using this security type. Next up is our hyper-exit security. This is type 6. This is used inside of a program to control form and row exit applications. The big thing that hyper-exit security gives you is that if you've applied it, the particular option that you've applied your hyper-exit security to won't show up on those form and row exits. So as far as the end users are concerned, it doesn't exist. You can restrict access through application security to say run equals no, but the option will still show up in the form and row exit. It will just be grayed out. It means the user can see that there's something that they can't do. In a lot of companies, they don't want the user to see that they're not allowed to do that, because then they're going to ask for it. Important to note with HyperExit is that it does not exclude the user from running that specific application. It just means that they can't access it from that specific form or row exit. So the parent program can't call the child program. It doesn't mean that they can't run that child program if it's called from somewhere else. In a closed security model, this security type is generally not needed. Now, there obviously are exceptions to that. There are some places where if you're calling, for example, a batch post, you don't want it called from within a specific program. You want it run for everything, or you want it run using a specific version that you've put on the menu rather than the XJDE or ZJDE version that's used when it's called from the form exit. So it doesn't prevent running the program. It just means you can't click on it from that specific location. All right, our next and final poll question. So Matt, you want to go ahead and launch this one? The question is, what security type is used to control access to a field in a form or a table? Now, I know I've got a lot of very experienced security folks on this, so I have high expectations for this one. All right, we are just about up to the same number of responses. So Matt, why don't we go ahead and close the poll and let's see what we have as our results. Okay, so the options that you had to choose from were hyperexit security, row security, tab security, or column security. Our overwhelming response is column security. So fantastic, that is the correct response here. Column security, or type 2, controls specific fields within the application forms. This is a great option, and I've done this multiple times. If you have a payroll clerk that needs to process payroll, but they shouldn't be able to see salaries or pay rates, especially in a union shop where they shouldn't be able to see this information, you can apply column security to hide the pay rate or the salary information, and they can still process everything. They just can't see the amounts that they're processing for the individuals. It's a great way to be able to obscure or hide that bit of information. It's also important to note that when you apply column security, you're applying it not just in that specific form, but you're applying it if somebody's trying to go in via data browser to look for that information. If they know what the tables are where that data is stored, it's still going to be hidden there. So they can't bypass the application to go directly to the data to look at it. Next security type is our tab security, or type 8. Nobody selected this on the poll, but this is a great thing if you are in an application and you have, let's say, a customer service rep that you want them to be able to update a specific field in a customer master, but you don't want them to have access to update everything. Well, from an action code security, they need to be able to have the add or change record set, but there's a lot of data in there. Rather than going through and applying column security to every field on every tab in those applications, you can apply tab security, and you can lock down an entire tab in one setting. So you can lock down 6 of the 7 tabs and then lock down the 5 other data fields within the tab that's left open so that they can only change the one specific item that you want them to be able to change. I've had many clients where they've applied 60, 70 lines of column security to lock down everything individually, and were able to pull 95% of that out, replace it with the tab security, and really streamline the access that they're able to provide for their users. All right, next up is our Solution Explorer security. This is the type A security in the 950 table. It's primarily used to control access to FastPath. There are other things that it does, but in a web browser situation, it's going to control access to your FastPath. It also controls access to secured and unsecured task views. So in JDE Edwards, you do have multiple task views. Not all of those task views are going to be accessible to your end users. So the easiest way to hide an entire task view is to make it a secured task view and then set the appropriate security in your type A so that your users are not able to see your secured task views. Other type of security on here is our data browser security, or type B. In the 950 table, this setting now is only half the battle for enabling your data browser security, or locking to enable it. Starting with 9.2.x, data browser is a UDO object type, which means by default, JDE is delivering that with no access. So you have to go into your feature set, you have to enable it, and then you have to apply the security to allow users to use data browser. Oracle Doc ID here, and this will be in the slide that will be available later today or tomorrow, is a great solution, and it goes through in a lot of detail exactly what you need to do for this. Briefly though, when you're looking at your UDO security for data browser, once you've enabled the feature, you want to come in and for star public, for star all, enable data browser across the board. If a user doesn't have access to the program, they can't go use data browser for it. So it's a great way to limit what they can do in a combination between your UDO security and your traditional 950 security for your data browser. You can also use this to restrict access to look at specific tables, for example, HR and payroll type of information. In addition to the traditional security that we've been talking about that controls the ability to run an application and what you can do within the application, there's a few others that I think are worth mentioning that you need to pay attention to. Those are the data privacy, batch post, and application query security. Data privacy is something that was asked for many, many years by the TechSig. It allows you to secure sensitive information in the address book, such as your social security number, tax ID, addresses, emails, many different things. When it's implemented, users can see their information, but they cannot see other users' information. So when a user logs in, they can see their own. If they look at somebody else's, there's just asterisks in the field. The data's there, but it's obscured from the end user. And again, that's applied in the program, and if they happen to go via data browser to try to look at it there, it's still hidden from them there. This can be applied to any address book search type. So it's not just type E, it's anything. One thing to keep in mind is that when you're applying data privacy, you can only apply a single data privacy role per user. So you need to really plan this out ahead of time and make sure you understand what types of access and visibility that role is going to be granted. Typically what I see is it's fairly restricted for most people, And then you're going to have folks that are responsible for customer and vendor master maintenance are going to open it up a little bit, and your HR payroll, you're going to open it up a little bit for them to see employee information. The next up is batch post security. Again, this is not something that's done within the F00950, but what it does is it helps you control the posting of batches by requiring a second person be involved in the transaction. It means that somebody other than the person that entered the batch has to review it before it can be posted. So if I'm entering a batch, Matt's going to have to review and approve it, and then I can go back and post it. Very useful for remediating any compliance issues around some of these issues here. Last one that we're going to look at here is your application or QBE query security. It allows you to prevent wide open queries on your interactive applications. I know for years as a CNC, I always had my scroll to end set to no, because when it was set to yes, there's always that one user that's going to go into your GL and do an open find and return millions of records and it's going to crash your web server. With this, it allows you to give back that scroll to end functionality, but it requires the users to put information in the QBE line so that they're not pulling everything back. They're having to filter and only look at certain records. So it keeps too much data from being returned and affecting system performance. When this is applied, it's applied to all users. You have to go in and exclude users from this security on a per application basis. So for example, when you install JDE Edwards, this is applied on things such as the security table. So as a security administrator, you can't just go in and do a wide open find on everything in the 950. You have to use the QBE to look at either a specific role, specific security type, or a specific setting, unless you've gone in and given yourself the ability to do those wide open finds. All right.
Ryan, we
Yes.
have a quick question from the audience.
Fire away.
Does the tab security work with personal forms and form extensions?
As long as that tab is identified, yes, it will. So when you go into the tab security, there's going to be a tab identifier, and so you can apply that to those as well.
Perfect. Thank you for the question.
Yep, thank you very much. All right, one thing that we've not addressed that you're probably all wondering about is row security. What is row security? A lot of you selected row security when we talked about what can control the field in an application. It's used to secure access to company or business unit level data within JDE Edwards. There's two modes of row security, exclusive or inclusive. Out of the box, JDE Edwards is delivered with exclusive mode enabled. It assumes open access unless you've had the access denied. Inclusive flips that on its head, and it assumes no access unless I have granted it back to you. Row security, again, along with all other security types, should be applied at the role level. So let's look at a couple of examples here. So in an exclusive mode of row security, you exclude the values you don't want a user to have access to. So in this example with role rowsec2, we have applied security to restrict values 0 to 2 and 6 to 999. So that means to see what the user can see, you have to read between the lines. So that means they can see business units 3, 4, and 5, and business units of 1,000 or higher. With row security, and I'm not showing it in the example here, you can apply row security either at the table level, so a specific table that has that alias, or you can apply it to star all tables. if you look at trying to apply row security for named tables for MCU, you're going to be there for quite a while. I don't remember the exact number, but we're looking at roughly 600 to 800 tables that have the MCU alias within them. So depending on what your approach is, my recommendation generally is to go with a star all table. So no matter where the alias is found, you've restricted it. All right, in inclusive mode, you include the values you want the user to have access to. So in this example, rowsec1, we put in that we want them to have MCUs, 2 to 5. So we put in from value of 2 through value of 5, all the yeses. This means that these are the only values that they can see. Inclusive, again, means everything else is excluded. So values 0 and 1 are excluded, and values 6 and higher are excluded by default. One thing that a lot of people get confused on is just because you've switched to inclusive mode of security, you're not automatically locking everybody out of all business units or companies or anything else. You still have to apply the security to a role and assign the role to a user. Once that role's been assigned, you're now in a deny all and grant back. So it means I've granted back 2 through 5, everything else is locked down by default. Inclusive is the preferred recommended mode. If you have large volumes of row security in your system, you're going to see a performance gain by switching from an exclusive mode to an inclusive mode. Now, it's as simple as flipping a switch to go from exclusive to inclusive. The impact of clicking that button, if you haven't done the work behind the scenes, is going to be tremendous. So you need to have the yes settings in place before you click that button. It is a system-wide change. So you can't just say, I'm going to test it in dev. Once you've implemented it, everything in the system is in that particular mode. All right, I wanted to touch on security models as well. We're getting down, we've got about 9 minutes, so I'm going to try to speed up just a little bit here, make sure I've got everything done. There's only 2 models in JDE. You're either in an open model or you're in a closed model. An open model is one in which only critical applications are secured. You either don't have a star public star all run equals no setting, it's not the recommended approach, and it frequently results in companies finding out what programs and UBEs are critical after the fact. After somebody has run it, they decide, you know, we probably shouldn't allow anybody to get to that particular program or UBE. A closed security model is one where only approved applications are granted. So you have the star public star all run equals no. You have your action security set to no's except for the OK select. Oracle recommends it, and I don't think I've ever met a security person who has not recommended going to a closed security model. Without proper tools and training and understanding, it can be difficult and time consuming to accomplish. E1 is delivered with effectively no security records. And I say 0, I think there's about a half dozen type 9 records for JDE for table conversions. Effectively, no security in the system. Later releases, JDE thankfully has started to change this. We talked about data browser. UDO's features are disabled by default, and you have to enable them out of the box in order to be able to use them. So they're starting very slowly to migrate in the right direction for security. In the open model, as we mentioned, critical applications are identified and secured from relevant users. A lot of hyperexit tends to be used in this approach to keep people from selecting specific programs on the exit bars, and a lot of menu filtering and fine cut is frequently used in an open model to try to use security by obscurity. If they can't see it, they can't get to it. Well, not exactly. Unless you have actually denied access to a program, your end users can and almost always will find a way to be able to run it. As we said before, there are multiple avenues for users to access programs, even if they can't see it on their menu. Closed security model. Again, this is the only recommended security model and the only true way to secure your system. Again, everything is locked down at Star Public. Specific applications are granted back at the role level as needed. So you can only run those objects that you have been granted explicit access to run. We mentioned this before. E1 allows you to have up to 30 roles per user. Practically, it's going to be a little bit less than that. We recommend creating business process-based security roles, and this is effectively a role-based access control. When you've put this in place, there is no workaround, there is no backdoor. People are not going to run anything that you haven't given them explicit access to be able to run. It's based on the concept of least privilege. Grant only what is needed to perform the job duties. It helps improve your operational efficiency. Again, remove the friction from the process. Faster response on access requests, better compliance, easier reporting, and better visibility. It results in reduced costs as well. Significantly less time is spent managing user access. It should not be a full-time job for any company, regardless of the size, to have somebody full-time dedicated to doing nothing but security. It can be much, much easier. It's lower risk, easier and faster response to identified issues, be able to restrict access to sensitive data, or if somebody's out and you need to be able to get that truck off the dock with a product, you can grant that access as needed very quickly as well. All right, so what security do I need? With an understanding of E1 security, now you can decide what you need to apply. Before you begin implementing, you need to have a plan and understand what the business needs around access. Do you have multiple companies where users should not see data from more than one company? Are there transactions that flow between the companies? Do you have sensitive data in the system? If you have European citizens in your address book, more of their data is considered sensitive than what a US citizen is. You need to make sure you go through everything with your business users to understand how they use the system. With the understanding of security, when you sit down with them, you can let them know what is possible and what isn't possible. Remember, application, action, and processing options are the main foundation of your security. These can be applied at the application version, form, and form version. It gives you very granular levels of control over your system. If you're applying security at the form and version level, keep in mind that only those forms and versions will be accessible to your users. So if a new version is created or they change to using a different form, you'll have to go through and add security for it. That's kind of the point of security, though, is you only want them to access things specifically that you want them to access. Solution Explorer Security, use it to control access to your fast path and hide your task views. And I know we're getting close on time. We've got about 3 minutes left, so I'm trying to, I apologize, get through the last bit of slides here pretty quickly for you. We mentioned, do you have employee or vendor information? Address book data privacy is the best approach for restricting access to sensitive personal data. Your security model needs to hit all of these points. It needs to be easy to use. It has to be easy to maintain. It has to be scalable, responsive, reusable. You have to secure the system and your data. All of this is designed to remove the friction from the process. All right, gonna pop it over to questions, and while we're waiting for questions to come in, I wanted to go over the next part of the Security Academy. As we mentioned on our website, this is a year-long journey through security for JD Edwards. Today is Introduction to JDE Security. Our next session is Advanced Security Concepts, and then we're going to get into the 2 months after that into some security change control, role control, and how to actually promote security if you have multiple security tables so that you're not ending up with dual maintenance. Our sessions are going to be the second Tuesday of every month at 11 a.m. Eastern time. So same time of the month, same time of the day, now through December. Second half of the year, our Security Academy Part 2, once we've gone through all the different security approaches, we're going to look at how can I implement security without impacting my business. Now that I understand what I need to do, what's my plan for putting it in place and making it seamless, frictionless for my business. We'll look at compliance and security reporting. Not everybody has compliance reporting requirements. My opinion, they should. Compliance, whether you're publicly traded or not, helps protect the financial integrity of your company. Everybody has security reporting needs, though. You need to understand who has access to what and how they're getting that access. We'll get into how to stop SOD violations before they happen. So if you're granting access to users and it's going to cause an issue, how do I stop it before it starts? A big one for me is how to automate your security. As we said before, it doesn't need to be and shouldn't be a full-time job. So how can I streamline and make it easier on my security administrator for things to just happen? And then planning to implement your security. You've got all of this great information. Now you've got to put the plan together. And the last one is taking all of this. How do you get buy-in? Where's the ROI? You're not going to get a project, especially around security, unless there's a benefit for the business. So we walk through how you can put that together and how you can show what the ROI is to help get funding and approval to be able to do a security and compliance project in your company. All right, I'm going to leave it here at our contact slide. We are 1 minute over. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. We have our emails and phone numbers up here. Also use the JDE Security Academy page on LinkedIn. If there's any questions there, I will be checking that on a regular basis and I'll be happy to respond directly there. If you happen to be out there and you see a question from one of your peers, feel free to reach out and help them as well and post the answer out there. JD Edwards is a small community. Security is a much smaller community within that. So if we can band together and help each other out and help answer questions or find solutions to sticky issues that people may be experiencing, let's do what we can to help each other out. All right, and we are 2 minutes over. I'm going to go ahead and end the session now. Once again, thank you very much for joining us today. We will have the ability to register for our next session on our website here within the next day or two, and we'll get the recording and the slide deck available up there as well. Once again, if you have any questions, please reach out. We'd love to interact with you and help you. This is an educational session. So if you have questions and I can help, please reach out. I would love to do so.